The morning came in exactly the same way. The sun fighting its way up the sky, a steaming cup of coffee held in my hand. I was sleepily turning the pages of the newspaper when my attention was diverted. An obnoxious orange notice slapped on my front door, as threatening as a warning sign on a package of dynamite. Fat, angry letters shouted, "Notice of removal. Your illegal crops need to be removed within 14 days or action will be taken." I froze, blinking hard. Sure, I must have read it wrong. But no. The words glared back at me, harsh and unmistakable. A laugh ripped out of me. Brief, harsh, incredulous. Whoever got the idea they could intimidate me, a farmer with rights to legally leased federal land, into ripping out my own crops apparently hadn't done their research. The laughter was extinguished fast, suffocated by a creeping, mounting heat of fury. Someone had just gotten into a fight they were nowhere near prepared for. By noon, the whole neighborhood hummed, more loudly than a chorus of cicadas. Word had gotten around like a wildfire. The HOA president, Deborah, had issued a declaration of war against my cornfields, calling them an eyesore. Deborah, with that acrid voice and unholy appetite for domination, had determined the vista of my crops behind her cookie-cutter suburbia was bringing down property values. I observed her from my porch. She marched along my property line, clipboard in hand, two HOA board members by her side like obedient thugs. She sported a ridiculously oversized sun hat and sunglasses that screamed arrogance, flailing her arms at my fields and yelling at a level she obviously meant for me to hear. She referred to my fields as a neglected wasteland, said they were an eyesore on the image of the community, and, the best part, that children could walk in and become lost as if my corn was some infinite, wild maze. I couldn't determine whether to laugh harder or finally lose my cool. Enough was enough. Placing my coffee aside, I walked towards her with conscious calm. The moment Deborah saw me, she tensed, clutching her clipboard as if it were a shield. Her cohorts retreated a step, looking at me as if I were liable to pull a six-shooter from my waist. "Good afternoon," I replied, my tone as even and cool as possible. Deborah didn't skip a beat, immediately going into a rant about HOA landscape rules, pointing a finger at my fields that were oh so distinguishable from the street. Those lovely streets, she asserted, fell under her jurisdiction. I asked, as coolly as I could must, how exactly her regulations might possibly extend to agricultural land that had been leased by the federal government for more than 7 decades. Deborah didn't flinch. With unshakable conviction, she asserted that her HOA's control took precedence over everything else. That's when I knew. Reason was a dead end. This wasn't a fight about brains. This was a raw, naked attempt to seize power. I grinned. The type you give to somebody who just announced they were going to wrestle a grizzly. Calmly, I let her know my property was in a federal preservation and veterans aid program. If she even so much as laid a hand on one stalk, the repercussions would be much worse than anything she was ready to deal with. Her eyes cut to slits, but I could tell she thought I was bluffing. Later that night, I received a new notice slipped under my door, an invitation to an emergency HOA meeting to vote out my crops. I stood there gazing at the paper, awed by the sheer temerity. My farm was a half-mile outside their neighborhood's boundary, and yet they acted like feudal overlords, intent on staking their claim. That evening, I sat silently on my porch as the last rays of the sun set my cornfields to pure gold. This land was not soil, it was blood, it was heritage. My father had farmed it, and his father before him. Now it stood as a place for veterans to heal through agriculture. Deborah had no idea what kind of spirit she'd provoked. I took a sip of my coffee and quietly vowed to the land itself. If she wanted war, I'd fight, on my terms. Quiet, legal, and completely annihilating. The following night, the air was heavy with humidity as I lurched my dented truck into the community clubhouse parking lot, lined with rows of shiny SUVs. Residents gave me looks, curious, apprehensive, and openly hostile, as I doffed my hat and walked in. The room was packed with folding chairs, all turned toward a table where Deborah and her board sat like stern judges in a kangaroo court. Deborah, draped in a blindingly white blazer, slammed a gavel down with the hubris of a dictator. She declared in serious tones that we had convened to discuss the violation presented by my farmland. She revealed a poster board covered with pictures of my fields, each one dramatically ringed in red, like some crime scene evidence. Deborah ranted about obstructed views, rodents, and falling home values, a drama of sheer nonsense presented with the melodramatic flair of a second-rate actress. When at last she opened the floor for questions, some of the more adventurous residents nervously pushed back, inquiring how the HOA had jurisdiction over land outside their boundaries. Deborah brushed them off, swatting their concerns like annoying gnats flying too close to her throne. Deborah asserted that the visual impact of my fields granted her the authority to act. I saw my opening. Moving ahead, I declared in a voice loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. For the record, this property is rented by the Department of Agriculture for a federal preservation project. It's under protection. Your HOA has no authority here, and by singling me out, you're infringing on federal property rights. The room went silent, a shiver running through it. Deborah's mouth jerked, but she soon pasted a forced, syrupy smile, offering to work out some neighborly compromise. I smiled back. Sure thing, I told her, tone as level as a stone wall. You keep your feet off my property, or face the feds. Her face flushed an ugly shade of red, and she warned that if necessary, she'd personally uproot the crops and send me the bill. I shrugged nonchalantly, vowing that all of her steps would be documented painstakingly, both for the sheriff and the Department of Agriculture. Deborah thumped her gavel on the table so loudly that the folding chairs rattled, bringing the meeting to an abrupt halt before it got further out of control. But war was only now beginning. The next few days saw Deborah increase her attack, mailing a certified letter that snarled an ultimatum. I had it framed and hung it on my kitchen wall like a trophy. Then I called. Clara, my straight-shooting contact with the Department of Agriculture. She laughed so hard when I recounted the story, I thought she'd drop the phone. She assured me that she'd send an inspector in a matter of days, and nonchalantly added that if Deborah crossed the line again, she'd face criminal trespassing charges. That same night, I saw Deborah's minions sneaking along my fence line with surveying equipment, attempting to cut out some fictional boundary. Later, my motion-activated cameras captured the queen herself, Deborah, sneaking onto my property under the cover of night, staking orange flags and spraying neon markings like some suburban gangster. The video was gold. I wrapped it up neatly and sent it on its way to Clara and the sheriff, along with a courteous little note. Evidence of illegal activity on federally protected land. Please advise. The next morning, things blew wide open. A landscaping crew stormed onto my property wielding weed whackers and chainsaws, with Deborah leading the charge behind them like a conquering general. I sat on my porch, coffee bubbling in my cup, and waited them out for a full 2 minutes before getting my phone. The first time a knife kissed a cornstalk, I placed the call. The sheriff showed up in record time, greeted by the sight of the whole neighborhood assembled to rubberneck. He was a giant of a man with a granite complexion, the sort of lawman who didn't dawdle on ceremony. He listened, stone-faced, while Deborah screeched about aesthetics and community values. Then he turned, cuffed her neatly, and detained her for questioning. The landscaping crew dropped their tools and scattered like cockroaches under a floodlight. I handed the sheriff both my video evidence and the federal lease documents. He nodded sharply, promising that formal action would follow. As Deborah was led away, still sputtering, I doffed my hat with a smile. But I knew better than to get too eager. The true repercussions only just started coming. Deborah had fallen silent, but Clara told me that federal wheels turn slow, and I was prepared. Patience, I told myself. One evening, my motion detectors flared to life. A new landscaping crew had arrived. This one dragged in from 2 counties away, their trucks rumbling like thunder. Deborah barked orders from the sidelines, oblivious to the bewildered looks on the workers' faces. I immediately called Clara. "Stay put," she instructed. "Agents are on their way." I hit record and captured everything. The instant the first mower blade lightly touched a stalk of my crops, government SUVs sped down the road, lights flashing through the dusk. Department of Agriculture agents bounded out, followed in short order by county deputies. Deborah, eyes mad and screaming, tore out at them, waving her clipboard like a banner of authority. A cold-eyed agent waited her out for precisely 30 seconds before calmly reading her the charges. Trespassing, vandalism of federal property, disruption of a federal program. The fines alone would have been staggering, and time in jail was a very real threat. Deborah's bluster broken. Her face crumpled in on itself as she stuttered and accused fingers in all directions but her own. But the agents had come prepared, with video, records, and no lack of witnesses. They made a final, chilling threat. Further meddling would land her in handcuffs. The landscaping team left their gear behind and ran off like spooked deer. Clara later verified that the repairs would be done by the government and would come after Deborah herself for damages, not the HOA. Deborah's universe was starting to crumble. 2 nights later, I was awakened by the crunch of gravel beneath feet outside my window. I picked up my flashlight, turned on the spotlight, and pinned 3 teenagers in its glare. Cans of gasoline and matches held trembling in their hands. I yelled and they stood there, rigid. They let go of everything and stammered out a confession. Deborah had hired them to burn the fields, offering to take care of any fallout. The sheriff came in just minutes, cuffing the boys while shaking his head somberly. This wasn't petty vandalism anymore. This was conspiracy to commit arson. Deborah had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. By sunrise, the whole town knew the truth. Deborah had engineered an attempted federal farmland arson. The sheriff's office validated the charges: conspiracy, felony endangerment, and attempted destruction of property protected by law. Deborah's loyal following collapsed overnight. Her former HOA supporters tripped over each other to say they had no idea, while Clara's staff established a full-time field office literally inside the community center. Black SUVs parked outside as a harsh, daily reminder of who was actually in charge now. Residents who previously complained about my cornfields now supported me, organizing farmland preservation seminars and contributing to the veterans program my land funded. Thirsty for justice, Deborah had engaged a sly city attorney who promptly levied ridiculous counterclaims against me: entrapment, slander, even harassment. Clara's lawyers ground the cases underfoot like crushed leaves. The judge dismissed them with a dismissive glance. Deborah's attorney resigned soon thereafter, and foreclosure notices materialized on her formerly imposing residence like vultures hovering. Her shiny SUV vanished next, taken back in haste. Her status dissolved in a single night. Deborah was ostracized, fleeing to hide from the ruin of her broken reputation. Life on the farm, however, thrived. The fields recovered, thriving under a tide of grants and donations. The veterans program grew, adding a greenhouse and an education center, attracting more veterans, more families, planting deeper roots into the community. Festivals bloomed, bringing neighbors together. Children laughed through the fields where Deborah had schemed. By the gate of the farm, a fresh plaque proudly asserted itself: "This land is shielded by collective strength and subtle defiance." Late at night or early in the morning, sometimes I sat in silence and remembered the years of struggle. This land was never simply about food. It was about heartache, heritage, and perseverance. One afternoon, a boy handed me a drawing, a crayon sketch of me standing tall amidst the golden fields, like a hero from some ancient legend. It was the one thing words couldn't convey. Deborah had thought she could overcome something greater than herself, and she'd done it miserably. The fields flourished, the town grew, and the foundation of this earth was stronger than her pride, her din, her machinations. As the sun set low over the rippling corn, I leaned back, coffee in hand, and smiled. We hadn't taken it with fury. We took it with truth, with patience, and with the unbreakable spirit of those who won't back down.